Well, to all those of you with the webinar, good evening. My name is Diane Craig. I'll be co-facilitating tonight with Michael Soltman. And I want to welcome all of you to the first of 3 collaborations that focus on vacation rentals in the San Juan Islands, hosted by the San Juan Islands Community Network. And I want to just take a few minutes to make a comment about the network. San Juan Island Community Network is a nonprofit. Its full name, it's a project of navigating our future, and it's dedicated to exploring the environmental, economic, and social challenges facing the islands with a focus on opportunities and solutions. Like many nonprofits these days, we rely on support from the community. And so I'm going to make a little PSA and ask for donations when possible, whatever, so that the network can keep doing forums like this. The network is hosting 3 forums on vacation rentals. Tonight's is Common Ground. Tonight is Discovery. Common Ground is the second, which will focus on shared ideas and how we might in fact work together to achieve positive results. And the third forum, Collaborative Action, will be about working together toward the common goals that everyone has identified through this process. Tonight's forum, the first of 3, is all about discovery, and will focus on the facts, feelings, and positions of the people in the San Juans with a goal of identifying areas of common ground. Before we get started, however, I just want to make a few comments, and that is that there's no denying that vacation rental is a hot topic these days, and there are loads of strong feelings around the issue. We just want to remind everyone, however, that this forum, indeed the series of forums, is a conversation. It's not a hearing, not even a town hall. It's folks who care about the San Juans having a conversation about how best to care for our home while sharing it with others who love the San Juans as much as we do. There's no preconceived outcomes, no weighted sides. We've come together on the neutral internet for a conversation to explore common ground. I'd like to introduce my co-facilitator, Michael Soltman, who's an executive coach and an experienced facilitator, and I'm just very pleased to be able to share this with him. I'd also like to welcome our panelists this evening, who have graciously agreed to participate in tonight's discussion. First, I'd like to identify Lopesian Jan Scilipoti. She's with Hosting on the Rock, which is an advocacy group for realtors and owners of vacation rental property. Thanks, nice to have you, Jan. Toby Cooper with the Vacation Rental Working Group is a 4th generation Orcasonian concerned about the proliferation and the impact of vacation rentals on the islands. And Doug Whittaker, who has conducted exhaustive research on tourism and the impact of vacation rentals on communities, and who comes to us all the way from Alaska. And finally, San Juan County Council Member Jamie Stevens, who along with Council Members Christine Minnie and Cindy Wolf are responsible for evaluating and monitoring the permitting of vacation rentals. Thank you all for being here. Before we start, however, I'd like to encourage everyone attending through Zoom to take a few minutes and complete a very short poll. It will benefit the discussion and help to ensure the long-term benefits of this series. And again, I'd like to appreciate the San Juan Islands Community Network for presenting this series and for the support of Sound Publishing and the Islands papers, the Island Weekly, the Journal of the San Juans, and the Island Sounder. Michael?
Good. Thank you, Diane, and welcome everyone. And my goodness, there are a lot of you out there. And we're just delighted to have you join us. And not everyone probably is as knowledgeable about this. I want to give just a little bit of background so that we can all start this conversation from the same place. So vacation rentals have been around longer than I thought. VRBO was founded in 1995. and it's owned by the Expedia Group, and they have over 2 million listings now. Airbnb was founded in 2008 and now boasts over 7 million listings in more than 220 countries. And so vacation rental is a big opportunity for people who travel. Here in the San Juan Islands, the county has required vacation rental permits on properties since 1997. And over the past 25 years, that number of permits has grown to over 1,000. And a typical average annual permit is about 50, ranging, say, from 40 to 70 permits a year. The first regulations for vacation rentals were promulgated way back in 1999. And then there was a substantial regulation revision in 2018, which covered things such as occupancy limits, quiet hours, safety, septic and waste regulations, having a 24-hour contact number and such. It also required annual certification by each vacation rental property owner. And at this point, based upon a staff report I looked at, there are about 590 some vacation rentals that are compliant as far as certification, and about 409 that are non-compliant at this point. The council placed a moratorium on new permits on January 13th for 6 months. And the purpose of the moratorium was to receive input from the Community Department of Development Planning Commission for the purpose of developing additional regulations for vacation rentals and AUDs. A public hearing was then held on February 23rd of this year to hear testimony on the council's proposed amendment to the moratorium established back in January. And that was amended by the council on March 9th. The key amendments established 8 findings of fact regarding perceived negative impacts of vacation rentals. And the permit moratorium was limited to urban growth areas in East Sound and Lopez villages. So the council continues to discuss and deliberate with the intention to amend the 2018 vacation rental regulations. And that takes us to our topic tonight. Tonight, we want to discover together and understand what are the issues at place here. What are the problems that we're trying to solve, and how can we move forward together to address these issues? I'm inviting each one of the panelists to have 5 minutes to introduce themselves, talk about their interests and their relationship to vacation rentals, and to state the problems that they see that we need to be solved. I'm going to invite Toby to start with us. Toby, let's get you unmuted and have you start and introduce yourself and tell us what's up for you.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. As Michael says, I'm Toby Cooper, and I've been a part of the Vacation Rental Working Group since it began. There's a lot to unpack with this issue, and I thought, it's great to see the people out there. I mean, all I see is a tiny little number that says 84 right now, so I can't see the sea of faces, but if I could, it would make me feel really, really good, because I think this is a great sign that people still care about the island. They care about the future of the island. They care about the kind of multiple aspects of vacation rentals, which includes the impact that these businesses, these entrepreneurial efforts have on the island lifestyle, but they also care about the economic benefits that they bring. So it is a complicated issue. But as sort of an introductory way of addressing this, I'm going to just give you 3 very broad general categories of this complex topic. Michael, as I said, he says, what are the issues that you're concerned about? So I'll just boil it down to 3 big ones. The first is, I don't want to sound too nerdy here, but the word proliferation. Proliferation is kind of at the heartbeat of this. And as Michael pointed out, the 2018 regulations did a lot of things, but did not address this notion of proliferation. There was no limit of any kind put on the number of permits that could be brought forward and so forth. So that's one of the pieces. Now, I got into this issue because I was in the room at the East Sound Planning and Review Commission in May of 2019 when Jonathan Aldort, who was the chair of the Vacation Rental Working Group, he was a voting member of EPRC then and proposed a resolution in support of a moratorium on new permits, not on the whole activity, but new permits to be forwarded to the county council. And he did this because a number of people had come to him and said, "You're a voting member of EPRC, EPRC, can't you do something? I'm being evicted from my rental property, from my rental home, because the property owner wants to convert to a vacation rental." And then he heard another person with that story, and then another and another, and he finally decided he would do something about this, and he brought it up before EPRC, and it passed unanimously. That was May of 2019. And shortly thereafter, the Deer Harbor Planning and Review Commission did the same, unanimous resolution calling for a resolution or recommending that the county council do so, because these EPRC and Deer Harbor are advisory to the county. And that set in motion a series of events that brought us here today. So as the the Vacation Rental Working Group, our first action was to propose a community conversation, much like what we're having here tonight.
Toby, you have 90 seconds.
Okay.
You have 90 seconds. Okay.
Oh, okay. And when we did that, we had no idea what was going to happen. We just opened the doors and found, to our surprise, really, that 200 people came in and spoke very strongly in the conversation that we had in favor of moratorium and in favor of doing something significant about the VR thing. So there's not much time on this. It's easy to ramble on. I'll skip ahead to the next category, which is the overall impact that what I just call customer behavior has. And we'll get into this more and more as we go forward, but there's just a lot of stories that come our way about people in vacation rental homes that make noise, that it becomes a party house, that parking cars on the neighbors' yards, and trespass, and setting illegal fires, parking horses in the field, and so forth. So that is something that would be addressed under the notion of accountability. And
we'll have to, Toby, we'll have to stop there, but we'll let you come back and do the third thing. Let me give you 30 seconds. Get the third thing.
Resource use: water, trash, and loss of open space. In words of one.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I promised everybody I was going to be a rigorous timekeeper, and you will all hate me by the end. Next, Jan. Please introduce yourself and give us some ideas of what you think are our key problems to solve here.
Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to apologize for my voice. We're all seeing each other again now, and we're sharing our head colds again. I'm Jan Scilipoti, and I live on Lopez. I've been here for 20 years. And during that time, I started out working at the ferry landing here. And then I started volunteering for the Lopez Community Land Trust. And then I started working for the Land Trust. And then I started doing landscaping for a local family. And that's what I'm doing today as well. Like many of us, travel has been a part of my life since I was young, when I backpacked around Europe. And back then we would get off a train and these little grandmother types would run up to us and say, come to my house, come to my house. And we would follow them, and they would show us a little room in their house where we could sleep while we were visiting that city. Today we call that a homestay, and times have changed. Now before I go, abroad, I spend hours looking online at short-term rentals, picking just the right one so that when my partner and I get there, we can pretend to be locals and fix some of our own food and have a little more space than we would have in a hotel room. And we truly love vacation rentals for that. I wanted to mention, I think Michael also brought this up, it's the same in the San Juans. For instance, I just recently found out there was a hotel on Crescent Lake that actually burned down in 1895. And I also saw an article in a Seattle paper from 1950 that was encouraging Seattleites to go up to the San Juans for the weekend to get away. So this is nothing new. People have been coming up to the islands for short-term times for, literally decades. It's just that these days we call it something different, and we use the internet to find them and to connect with homeowners. A couple days ago, I heard a rumor about myself. It said that I'm pushing to have a vacation rental. And I just wanted to say that the reality is actually worse than that. I already have a vacation rental. So I found, since I've become a host, that I really enjoy doing it. And when the Planning Commission recommended this moratorium last November, I suddenly woke up and went, oh no, what's happening in the islands with vacation rentals? And I started to connect with other owners on all 3 islands, and we started hosting on the Rock. And our sole intent with it is to just make sure that owners have a voice in what's happening in the county. We have a core group that give way more time than they should, and I just wanted to thank them. Vicki Lineback, Karen Speck, Linda Bannerman, Johannes Krieger, and Jason Schmidt. You guys are the best. I really appreciate your unending research, your connections, and your good sense. I think at this point, I'd like to start conversing with what Toby said for his 3 points. I totally agree with him on all 3. We're not rabid vacation rental folks that say we want more unendingly. We're aware of all these problems that we have here in the San Juans, and we want to, figure out ways to make it work out. He talked about proliferation, which I'm going to take to mean the number of permits each year increasing the amount of vacation rentals that are running on the islands.
Jan, you have 1 minute.
Okay. One big thing I'll say about that is there are still a lot of vacation rentals that are running that are non-compliant. And the big issue with that is enforcement. We don't have quick, timely enforcement yet in the county. So that's one of our biggest points. I feel like we need to get that happening. Second thing, impact on guest behavior. Boy, all of those things he mentioned, we've actually addressed with the new regulations in 2018, which are actually quite strict compared to other regulations around the country. And I'd love to go into that in more detail. And then the third thing is resource use. I love this one because I really want to look at the data for this. For instance, water usage. I did find out that the state says that the annual water usage of a single family home is 38,000 gallons. And I checked my rental for last year, we used 29,000 gallons. So it really is not the case that a vacation rental always uses more water than a non-vacation rental.
Thank you, Jan. We're going to have to stop there. Appreciate it. Okay, so Doug, you've been doing studies and collecting information about this, but what have you discovered? What are the key issues that we're dealing with here? And talk a little bit about who you are and how you got in this.
Okay, so I'm Doug Whittaker. I'm a geographer and social science researcher and planner. We got invited to work on some projects with your terrestrial managers group, which is a sort of an amalgam of county, state, and federal agencies that have land managing responsibilities on the different islands. And they work on sort of natural resource issues and visitor impact issues in those places. And we're sort of experts in visitor impact management and tourism type stuff. So we came in, and from 2017 to 2019, we did a series of studies for those folks, mostly funded by Park Service and the county. The county taking the bulk of that towards the end. We did a study of visitors online at different sites on the islands, as well as on the ferries. There were also residents in that survey because people were on those ferries or in those areas as well. We did an accommodation inventory for the islands. We did some analysis of ferry use. We took a look at surveys of residents and businesses later. They got essentially the same survey that we were giving on the ferries the year before. We talked to remote island visitors, so that's boaters that would come out to the remote islands. And then we also talked to visiting boaters that were coming to your main marinas, like Roach and Friday Harbor and places like that. More recently, we just worked on a southern resident killer whale stakeholder values and attitudes study for the county and the Marine Resources Group. And we're not experts on vacation rentals. What we're experts on is capacities in natural resource areas, like protected areas, like parks and refuges and things like that. But I think the principles apply, and we've done regional planning before as well. So we sort of know something about those topics. When you pose the question, what's the problem to be solved? I think you're thinking a little bit like an engineer, and I'm not sure that's the right approach. And not to make fun of that or anything. I think it's more like if you own a boat, you guys are seafaring folk, or a lot of you are. A boat's kind of this endless project. There's always new things to fix. There's things you got to try to upgrade, and you never get anywhere. The boat is always just in need. And I think that's the way it's always going to be with tourism and protected areas and lifestyle issues. The modern world is not going to stop, and it's always going to be a threat to slower traditional ways. And our surveys show that your residents, your visitors, and your businesses actually agree, incredibly so, more than anywhere else we've ever studied, on what they want the islands to be. And they do prefer a slower pace, high quality of life. But what's amazing is there's very little difference between your business folks and your residents and your visitors. They're all pretty much the same kinds of people. So you guys can go put them in tribal groups and say that one is a lot worse than the other, but in fact, their values seem very similar to a social scientist. So that's just something for you guys to remember when you get stuck on a topic. And I would say that getting stuck on a moratorium or a limit on vacation rentals is one of those topics that you might get stuck on, because it sounds like a fix, but it's likely to have a bunch of some consequences you can't anticipate, as well as several that you can't anticipate. So, hopefully we'll talk through those a little bit. But basically, the biggest thing that you should pay attention to is that the number of accommodations that you have on your islands, and that includes the people that live here, the people that visit as second homes, as well as all the people that stay in vacation rentals that you know about and vacation rentals that you don't know about. And there's probably a bunch of those too, that are not permitted.
1 minute, Doug. 1 minute.
Great. And the point of that is that your ferry system doesn't quite present a limit on the number of people that can come to the islands, but your accommodation does. So it's something to pay attention to, but vacation rentals on their own are not the whole story there. So I would just urge you to pay attention to the whole story, which is the number of hotels and campgrounds you have, the number of vacant homes, so-called vacant second homes, and how those get used matters. All of those things matter in terms of how many people are here, and you really don't have a good handle on that. Our studies helped get you some places on that, but we still don't have a great idea about that. So I'll stop with that, and we can use that time for something else.
Thank you very much. Now I want to invite Jamie to come on, and even though you're well known by many, let's assume that everyone knows you. So tell us a little bit about you and about your role in this, and how you're seeing the county identify what needs to be solved here.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was really great. And I really want to thank Doug for being here, since he has been involved in so many of those studies that we've done. I just wanted to back up a little bit. Vacation rentals have been a part of our fabric of the islands for a long time, way before VRBO or anything like that was organized. Many realtors, people in their prime earning years, would purchase property here, have it as a vacation rental, and then eventually retire here when their mortgage was paid off. And it was a way of doing that. And we have a lot of friends and neighbors who are in that situation. And I just want to thank the San Juan Island Community Network for inviting and putting this together. And you've already introduced me, and I am the current chair of the San Juan County Council. And I'm in my 11th year serving on the council. I'm here representing the council and our agreed upon work plan. I'd also like to say that to Michael and to everybody else, that all three of those studies have been also done with the input of county money and county energy and county department energy. During my time on the council, we've discussed and debated the regulations that were passed in 2018. Enforcement started immediately, and we issued over $100,000 in fines to people who didn't have their permit and weren't upping their permit. So some of those new regulations were not really felt until last year, which also happened to be a pandemic year. The new regulations related to health and safety items, as was stated in the very beginning of this, as well as enforcement and permitting and requiring a local contact to address complaints. In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussions concerning vacation rentals. And these were mainly hosted by the Vacation Rental Group on Orcas. With the new council this year, it was important to them that we dive into the subject again. We explored many suggestions, worked with our deputy prosecuting attorney, worked with our planning department, and tried to come up with a lot of the suggestions that have been put forward. So as we explored these suggestions, some were workable, some were unworkable, some were a legal problem, and some couldn't realistically be enforced. However, during this time, community development and planning, because we're also in our comprehensive plan update, produced a lot of data on the number of vacation rentals, where they're located, percent of housing stock, percent of the VRs on the various islands. From this process, council determined that we needed to analyze the number of vacation rentals going forward and address the saturation of vacation rentals in certain areas. With much public input, council enacted a 6-month moratorium on the issuance of new vacation rental permits in certain land use areas. These are East Sound Residential, Rosario Heights, and the Lopez Village Urban Growth Area. The purpose is to determine if we need a cap or what that cap should be on vacation rentals. The saturation issue is being addressed in the comprehensive plan update. And I want to just say, between the saturation issue and a cap on the number, they are related, but they're two distinct issues. Because regardless of the number of vacation rentals on in an area or a neighborhood or an island, a lot of units in one particular area, particularly a neighborhood of small lots, is a big impact to the lifestyle of that neighborhood. Whereas the difference is, if you, on the number of vacation rentals, that's a little wider topic as to how many is too much. Community development and planning has proposed things to us, several options. The council has given them some direction on how they would like to go on that. But
Jamie, you have 30 seconds.
okay, so just like I said, we have given them direction, and as in regards to the number, a total number on a particular island or in the county relates to how many is too many. So they're different but related topics.
Good. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you. And Diane's going to give you an opportunity here in a minute to embellish your opening comments with additional data. I do want to point out to everybody in the webinar that we're inviting your questions, and that's through the Q&A button on your screen, not through chat. Q&A fires the directions right into Diane and I. We'll take a look and do what we can during the third part of this this evening. So with that, Diane, let's move on.
Thanks. Thank you so much. You've done a terrific job, each of you, to illustrate what's important to you about these issues, about vacation rentals. And so I'd like to start with Toby and ask you if, with the work you've done with the working group on Orcas, can you present some data that defines the problems that you outlined specifically? I think one of the last one was customer behavior, but all of the others as well. And separate your perceptions and the perceptions of the group, and we'll help with that, from the actual data that defines and clarifies what those problems are and how they can be solved. Take it away, Toby.
Okay, well, Diane, well, the term, as you use the term data, you know, it just gets to be chasing your tail a little bit, you know, because so much of the data on housing and occupancy and all these, you know, tourism and everything is in the hands of the county. We don't have the capacity to generate original data, but we look at the county's data. And there have been times where we've interpreted the data differently than the county does or differently than others do. So when we talk about data, a lot of it is based on looking at county data and trying to make sense of it and perhaps interpreting it differently. So you know, I just want to point that out. You know, in thinking about this question, from, you know, last night, it just seemed to me that what was really important was to point out what sources and what information has led us to take the positions and adopt the attitudes that we have. And really the first such data point, and I will use this as a data point, is the public meetings that we held, that we hosted last year in 2019. There was 3 of them on Orcas, 1 on Lopez, 2 which Jamie was attended, and 1 on Friday Harbor. And there were some very telling moments, especially in the first one, because as I said in my opening, we had no idea, you know, what we have tonight is a meeting that's mostly by invitation. You know, everybody's been given out the word, and you kind of said this in the beginning that, you know, there's people have their minds made up, one or the other, or something like that. On that July day in 2019, we had no idea who was going to show up, how many, or what their attitudes were, or anything. Other than we'd heard stories like Jonathan had of people that had been evicted and so forth. So we just opened the doors and 200 people came in and packed the room. And for a meeting on Orcas Island, that was unheard of, to have 200 people do anything more than usually, you know, you have a lecture or, you know, play or something like that. I mean, anyway, it was pretty impressive. But there was this one moment early on that really struck me, and it kind of hit home, and it kind of told me what was important, what was, you know, what was the information that was leading us in a direction as to how to analyze this topic. And somebody in the audience stood up and said words to this effect, and I'll just paraphrase. It was something like, you know what, if people don't do something about this, we're taking matters into our own hands. You know, just a statement of just sort of frustration. And the room exploded in applause. And that told me something that has really set the tone for a lot of this conversation. That people were feeling, there's a feeling that people have about vacation rentals that is a combination of discomfort. I don't want to say fear exactly, but it's kind of a combination of unsettled unease about the future of our lifestyle on the islands. And if I'm a VR owner in that moment, when that person received all that applause, I'm asking myself, not how we can defeat or marginalize or set aside this point of view, but how can we harmonize?
30 seconds, Toby.
How can we be the good neighbors? And that's just the message I'd like to pose for the future of this conversation, these meetings that we're having now, is let's explore ways that we can work together to make this good neighbor policy real.
Good. Thank you. Diane, you need to unmute.
Jan, sorry. Would you like to take it on next and do so and unmute? So,
Sounds good, Diane. Thank you. So I love talking about this stuff. Everybody that I know is so tired of hearing me say vacation rental. So Toby, it's nice to actually get to talk to you. I do want to say something about those community meetings that the VRWG had. In the beginning, when you first started them, I know of several vacation rental owners that did go to the meetings. And I'll have to tell you, and I hope you can hear this, to a person, they say they feel like they were not heard and that they were literally stopped from speaking and giving their opinion at the meetings. So it may have felt to you like it was very inclusive and open, but the feedback that I've been getting was that it did not feel open and inclusive to vacation rental owners. So I did want to just bring that up. And we did not have our group back then. So I know it may seem strange that you didn't have many people like standing up for vacation rentals, but I think it's because we just really weren't dialed in to what was happening. So I apologize for that. One of the things I've really noticed, big picture, is that this does seem to be somewhat Orcas centric. I've kind of coined that term. Both of the resolutions, the one from Deer Harbor and the one from East Sound, came from Orcas. And when we started getting involved as hosting on the Rock, the overall support for dialing back the moratorium came from San Juan and also from Lopez. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't, make changes on all the islands. However, I do think that Orcas is feeling the brunt of some of these more negative aspects. And I do think that there are ways to address most of them. Doug, I wanted to say I really appreciated your words about how vacation rentals are not the whole story. I so agree with you on that. I think that we are taking, we're being shown to be the problem, but really it's not just us that are bringing tourists to the islands. Like you said, it's the campgrounds, it's friends and family that are bringing folks out here. It's the hotels, and it's also the boaters who come into the marinas and then come onto the islands to, go to the shops and restaurants. So I would really like people to think about the overall picture, not just vacation rentals. In terms of being good neighbors, boy, that is such a huge one. Toby, if there's one thing I could ask you, it's let's stop saying party house, Because truthfully, why would any owner want a party in their house? I mean, I had one. It wasn't a loud party, it was a very small party. But when my housekeeper and I walked in there the next day, it was horrible. It took us so much extra time and energy to clean up and money. Nobody wants parties in their houses. And we do everything we can to try to keep parties from happening. And we have lots of good things we can do. One of the things I want to mention is, unlike hotels, campgrounds, friends and family, and boaters, when someone comes to stay in a vacation rental, we actually build a communication with our guests. So I literally have several, sometimes actual phone conversations, but mostly it's just emails and texts with the guest, telling them about the islands, about noise, about the neighborhood. I ask them to be careful with water usage. I tell them that they're coming to a place where they have to be quiet starting at 10 at night and going until 7 in the morning. I have a whole list, actually, of things I have to tell every guest when they get ready to stay in my vacation rental.
1 minute,
this-
Jan. 1 minute.
This isn't something that people in hotels generally do. So I think it's actually an opportunity for those of us who do bring guests to the island to kind of help them understand some of the issues that we're going through and help us to take it in a direction that we choose. And we can go into specific ways later because obviously time is an issue. Trying to think. The other thing is noise. You asked about data. Erica Shook of the planning department gave us the number of nuisance reports in the last 3 years in permitted vacation rentals. There were less than 3. But the number of nuisance reports in non-permitted vacation rentals since 2016 were more than 50.
We have to stop there, Jan. Thank you.
That's a great place to stop. Thanks.
Diane, you need to unmute.
Doug, would you like to add anything to that, to the conversation with that?
Sure, I have a few comments to make. It's always interesting as a social scientist to hear people characterize comments at a public meeting as data. So I don't consider that good data. I consider it a great way to learn about issues and hear a range of opinion. It's excellent at that. But unless you surveyed folks, and it's funny that you popped up a poll at that particular moment, but unless you survey people, you really don't know what the room was thinking. You know what the people who were good at public speaking were thinking, perhaps. And sometimes by clapping, you know some a feeling for the room. But she should be careful about characterizing that. It's great ways to get issues out on the table, and it sounds like there are some clearer frustrations out there. So that's a good thing to know. As a social scientist, I'd want to drill down into which impacts, who's causing them, what could fix them. And in that sort of arena, I think one of the things that I see happening in the way that you guys are talking is that you're generalizing and you're going bigger than the tribes. You're blaming whole groups. First it was VRs, then maybe it was somebody who lives near VRs, then now it's potentially boaters. I don't think it's good to use the whole group as your target. What you want to target is the behaviors that you think are bad, or the impacts or the outcomes that are bad. So if it's traffic or if it's space on ferries, those are things we can get our heads around and start identifying causes and potential solutions. But if you just say it's a whole group, I think you're going to basically yell at each other and you're not going to get as much done, I think. So I think there are a bunch of negative impacts that happen. People on vacation are not always behaving well. They often do want to party. That's one of the reasons you leave home, is so you can go and drink with your friends or whatever. And yeah, they're too loud sometimes. And if that's in a neighborhood with small lots, as Jamie was saying, I'll bet that's a problem. If it's out in the woods on a point with no other house around, that's probably a great place for them to do that. So anyway, there's lots of ways to think about it. I mean, ultimately, from an economic standpoint, you want all these people to leave their cars behind, bring their wallets, stay in their vacation rental the entire time, and then leave. And you want them to stay a long time as well, so they won't be on the ferry a lot. They'll be on it once, stay for 2 weeks, and leave. But that's not the reality. You get a lot of weekend traffic. A lot of people come for 2 or 3 days. Maybe it was different in this last year because of COVID, but assuming COVID does end, in the future, you're still going to have a bunch of weekenders coming. And those people may or may not behave well, and you're going to have to manage that somehow. And you're going to have to decide whether you have too many in a neighborhood. That's a great way to think about it. If you have that saturation concept, seems like a good one to me. So anyway, I think that the point is you can definitely target these impacts that you think are a problem, but I would urge you to focus on those impacts. Pay attention to which things are bothering you. And some of those things are directly attributable to VRs and the people that stay in them. Others are not, and others may be some kinds of VRs and not other kinds. And you should pay attention to that. And some will be other kinds of accommodations and not. And the big unknown accommodation that you really can't control are the friends and family in the second homes. People that come to those second homes, they really act like visitors. They are visitors, but they're friends of the person. They're not doing it for pay. Or if they're doing it for pay, you don't know about it. You earn no income from them through your taxes. They behave just like VR guests, some good, some bad. And there are a lot of people. And I think you learned that this year. So I just heard some data from the historic park on San Juan and how they've had much higher use level off season this year than in any previous year because of COVID, because people were living in houses that were otherwise not occupied in the winter and in the spring. So anyway, those are some interesting things to think about. I guess I'll stop for that for now.
Thank you. Diane, you're muted.
Jamie,
Yes.
would you like to contribute data from the county on any of those issues?
I'm not sure what question are we answering right now? Or I mean, what was the question? Number 4, it's kind of hard to remember what exactly I'm supposed to.
That's okay. I'm sorry. It was to identify the data that addresses the problems that had been addressed in the first question. And you did take care of some of that when you talked about it, but I think particularly around issues of saturation and some of the things that Toby mentioned that I think the county probably has some information. Toby mentioned that it's not always easy to get to and that there's a difference of interpretation. And maybe you could address that in terms of how some folks see the data differently than council.
Well, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
No, thank you.
Hold that up. Okay.
I totally agree with Doug. There's been too much anecdotal information and not real information. We just had, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it might have been 3, where we've been having recaps on where we are with the moratorium and the vacation rentals. And I have to time out for a second and back up. I am not in the county office. I am in my kitchen where I have been forever. But after, about 18 months of this, my wife would still like to be able to eat and walk behind me without being in a meeting. So just want you to know that I do have a background. It's all fake.
Thank you.
And I just want to go back to Doug again. I think we do need to have that data and be able to use it. And the county does have that data. And I don't think it's misrepresentation. In fact, on some of the data I went through before our moratorium discussion, where I just want to say 75, we had 2.5, almost 3 hours of public comment at 3 minutes apiece. So we had a lot of people. And before that, I went through and I didn't have time to do all the islands, but I went through Orcas because I know they're the most impacted. And out of all of the vacation rental ownership, there was one unit that had 5, or one entity that had 5 units. And when I traced back and went through the state's business system, all the rest, at least that are permitted, all were locally owned from Orcas. So those are one of the statistics that I think people get mixed up. Also, because we're updating our comprehensive plan, they've shown over 40% of the housing stock in San Juan County is occupied less than 6 months a year. And I know that has changed in the, and this is my anecdotal evidence. Got 3 of those houses in my neighborhood, and 3 of those houses have had people in them for over a year now. And it's not people, it's the owners who were COVID refugees. And many of those people are thinking of reversing their lifestyle and living here and having a condo in Seattle. If that bears out, we don't know. Additionally, we said there's, I think up front, it was said that we have over 1,000 VRs in the county. And when we had that public hearing, it was definitely heavily Orcas with issues, and I don't blame them. They have, out of those 1,000, they have almost 50% of the permits are on Orcas. But I do want to say, since the moratorium has been enacted, only 5 permits have been granted on San Juan Island and 2 on Orcas. And I think it was said earlier also in the introduction is that we average somewhere around 40 to 50 permit applications per year. But what's always fails to get mentioned is we have a significant number of abandoned permits, or people who don't want to have a permit anymore. And this played out at the end of 2019 because the number of new and abandoned permits netted out almost 0. And I think that's something we have to take into account, that people are giving up the permits as well because they have to keep them up now with the new regulations. So if they're not in the business, some people are just saying, I'm not going to pay for the permit. And most of the permits, so everyone should know, are in rural residential designations and rural farm forest areas, and most are along the shoreline.
You have a minute, Jamie.
That's all I have to say on the numbers.
Okay. So, Jamie, there were 8 findings of fact in the action that the county recently took in March. And were those findings of fact, were they based upon data that you guys had?
Yes, we were looking at a broader scope, but the data that we had was went to establishing or looking at and trying to establish caps.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so those were that we used.
Okay. And is there a particular timeline that your committee or that the council has in terms of making any decisions or taking any actions here?
Well, the moratorium, I'm not going to have the date right. I'm sorry, lack of data. It's mid-July, the moratorium, and we can choose to either extend it another 6 months or act on actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to speculate at this point.
All right, you're one of 3, I understand. Okay, this takes us to more of an open conversation. And I appreciate the goodwill in this group, and I think this can be a conversation of goodwill, and that's why I'm inspired about being a facilitator here. And I appreciate the input that's come so far, and I think there's probably more to come. One of the things that was said tonight, and I believe Doug said it, is that we can sort of pass information and innuendo and whatever we want back and forth, but the most powerful thing that could happen tonight, as many of you have said, is if we can start to move towards what are some possible solutions, what are some things that we can do, as Doug says, to address what's going on and to continue to move forward with having a successful vacation rental presence on the island. So I'd like us to give a shot at that, and you can feel free to provide more information. You can feel free to ask questions. What I'm going to do is pay attention to whether you're actually raising your hand with a hand, not doing the hand raise symbol. And I'll just keep track of who's up next, and I'll let you know, and we'll go through. But has anybody got something that they'd like to start with in terms of, well, where can we take it from here tonight, building on where we want to be in our next forum? Our next forum is, so what can we go from here, but where can we start? Anybody? Jan, and then Toby. Oh, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Got it. The first thing I'd love to say is county enforcement and also education. I feel like many residents do not know about the 2018 regulations, which are quite strict compared to other nationwide standards. They don't know about them, and they don't know how to interact with them. Like, for instance, if they have a problem with a vacation rental, what do they do? So I'd like to educate people so they know what's in place and what they can do. The second thing is I see a real lag with enforcement. I think we've got some great things in place with the county, but maybe Jamie, you could speak to this. I thought we had an enforcement officer that was supposed to do vacation rentals, but I heard maybe he was diverted to doing something else recently. So I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay, let me ask you one question though for clarification, Jan. What do you mean by education?
I mean, somehow, as we say around here, getting the word out about the regulations that are already in place. For instance, this folder right here is my folder that I had to complete to actually get my permit. It was extensive. It took 5 months, and it cost $2,300 for the initial permit, and I have to do an annual fee every year. And it has a lot, like probably 15 requirements, and I don't think the average person knows about those requirements. So that's what I mean. Educate people about what we already have in place.
I see. So that so they have knowledge of what it takes to get a permit. They have knowledge of what the rules are. Okay, I'm going to let Toby. Toby was next, then Jamie. Go ahead, Toby.
I'm with Jan, that we can look at this sort of general topic of enforcement and accountability as, I think, as a first effort with a group like this. I feel very good about that, the potential for that. But in addition, I'd like to take it one step further. We've talked a lot about the sort of good neighbor idea that every business in America, anyway, wants to be a good neighbor to the communities in which they're doing business. Whether it's a local gas station or a 7-Eleven or a Starbucks or whatever, the t-shirt shop in East Sound. They all want to be good neighbors because that's good business. And I think we can get there. I'm very pleased that there's been some posturing here, as we've seen at the public hearings, where people are sort of talking at each other instead of with each other. But we're getting past that. And we don't need to go into who shot who and whether our public meetings were provided access or not. Rather, I'd like to keep moving forward. So I'd like to take that notion of accountability and the list of provisions that you're supposed to comply with and all that one step further. There was an impressive list you showed. Maybe you post it on the door, maybe you give it to the people ahead of time or something like that. But any good business, the key to success in any good business, in part, is setting the expectations. And if we could take the 2018 regulations and move them forward in the process of somebody making the decision to click the mouse and come to Orcas Island and stay in a vacation rental, such that before they even click the mouse, they understand what Orcas Island is all about. They understand something, they learn something, they hear something about bald eagles and tranquility and the rural sort of quiet lifestyle that is here. Because data or no data about how many party houses there are, and I will use that word because it happens. It happens, Jan, it happens. I don't know what percent it happens. Is it all, some? No, not all parties are vacation rentals and not all vacation rentals are parties. It's okay, but when it happens, it needs to be addressed. So if we can take this education process forward such that before people make the decision to come here, they know what to expect. And they know to respect the neighbors, the neighborhoods that they'll be, staying in close proximity to. And they know the lifestyle that people love here. And they know about the rural qualities and the forests and, the shorelines and everything, and the orca whales. That'll be
So
a plus.
Toby, I'm
So-
going to come back to you, but I'm going to be
Okay.
curious. I'm going to be curious about what idea you have and what you mean by education. I want to go to Jamie now, and then Doug, I want to know what you're thinking because it looks like you're thinking. So Jamie.
I just want to say that in our regulations, the accountability that Jan was talking about is there. It is supposed to be in the unit when people arrive, as well as whatever they put out. So that accountability and understanding what's expected of the renter is one thing. I do know that whether it's, which I have no control over, our Visitors Bureau or our local chambers of commerce, they are very in tune with exactly what Toby was talking about is this is what you should expect. And it's by island almost. If you're going to Orcas or San Juan, this is what you should expect. And this is what we would hope you would appreciate and respect. As far as enforcement, we had great enforcement and we had a year of probably not great enforcement, but we had a year of not great of a lot of things. So yes, as Jan said, our enforcement officer might have been diverted, but so was about half of our entire staff across every office, whether it's the courts, the auditor, or anybody else was diverted to emergency management to respond to COVID. And that's not an excuse, it's a reality. And we want to make this work. We want to have the enforcement to make it work. And, I was looking, and I don't know the numbers, but I'm just going to go to Jan's numbers since she brought them up. But on complaints, whether they're permitted or unpermitted, that's a very low number considering that there's 1,000 plus. So there's 1,000 permitted VRs and whatever number of unpermitted VRs, and the numbers that Jan gave, that's a pretty low percentage. There's probably neighborhoods who have more complaints than that just with their full-time residents.
Thank you. Doug, I want to go to you, and then I'm looking for who wants some time after that.
Okay, yeah, I've got a couple of quick things to say. So I like the idea of spending some time on your enforcement and your compliance stuff. I think you need to pay attention to whether that's just about the bad behavior at houses, or whether it's about trying to find the ones that are sort of in the gray markets or black markets for, that are not part of your system, so you're not getting any lodging tax off of them. Both of those things are important, right? Because if they're doing these things for as a business, you do want to get your tax off of them, but you also want people to behave well if you can. But I think there's still a bigger issue, and that is that there are people that come to these islands that stay in VRs. There are also people that stay in the second homes, whether they're the homeowner themselves or some of their guests. All of those things have the biggest impacts on your place and change your rural, rural lifestyle and some of the things that everyone says they value about the islands, which I think is true. I think both your businesses and your residents and your visitors all value a slower pace of life, the island life, that kind of thing, and more so on some islands than others and that sort of thing. But paying attention to that is important. And that's a bigger topic. And, the capacity, how many is too many VRs, can only be answered if you actually have some sense of how many is too many visitors overall and how many is too many vehicles overall. And those are functions of the other stuff you do. Do you have bike trails for them? Can you separate bikes from traffic? Do you have parking spaces for them? Are there ways to deal with the ferry rushes, et cetera, et cetera? It goes on and on. That's what a lot of our work over those 3 years was about. There's dozens of great actions you guys could take to solve those kinds of problems with money from VRs or from hotels or from some other way that you tax people, which I know nobody wants to do. But those are the things that you also have to pay attention to. If you do a moratorium, it'll get you part of the way there, but not all the way there. If you still have a bunch of vacant second homes that still get used at the same kind of efficiency they got used in the last year during COVID, you'll still have a ton more people than you can handle, and you'll still have some of the problems that you'll have. Maybe not the party house problem, that's really specific, but some of the other problems, traffic, parking, ferry rushes, et cetera. Space on ferries, when you guys want to get off the island, visitors know a lot longer ahead of time what they're going to do than you guys do. And so you guys lose out to those spaces a lot. Anyway, I think those are the things that you should pay attention to. And then just because I don't know if I'll get time to say one last thing, if you ever do a limit on VRs, you will have another problem too, which is once you set a capacity, and I've spent my entire career urging parks and refuges and forests to set capacity. So I'm pro capacity. Some people call me Dr. Capacity at times, but when you create a capacity, you automatically create an allocation problem. And that is another big separate problem. Easy to fix for the people you're going to grandfather in. But going forward, you have a problem of deciding who gets the new ones, if you're going to have any new ones. So just letting you know that the easy win, that's kind of the question that you pose to us. There's not an easy win. If you decide that a moratorium or a limit is, and even if you came up with a good limit, you got a lot of work in front of you to figure out how you're going to distribute and allocate those in a fair way, because there'll be winners and losers. There's no easy way to do that. So. All right.
Doug, let me ask you one follow-up. Has your firm done anything with the questions around, actually, I think the study wasn't yours, but around the tension between the need to have visitors for the economy of the island? A lot of it has to do with the amount of tourism that comes through versus the infrastructure to deal with that. Did your group look at that at all?
Well, I think that's always the tension. You want both, right? You want enough, and what your place has really found is that your businesses also feel that way. They don't actually enjoy this giant peak in the summer that's hard to deal with, and they have to hire people for. They have to put on extra people that they can't train, that they can't find, that there's no housing for, and then they have to try and kind of get swamped by everybody. And then the rest of the season, they don't make enough money. So they would love it to be spread out. So anything you can do to spread folks out, it's that kind of sustainability stuff is really important for the long-term economic health of your islands, but also for the lifestyle stuff, because those summer peaks, and especially if those start happening at other times of the year, are nobody's idea of a good time. They didn't leave Seattle to come and get in traffic jams in East Sound or Friday Harbor. They don't want that. And, so I think those are issues, and you're always trying to find that balance. You're trying to fix one thing without creating unanticipated consequences that destroy businesses or other things. And you like to do things slowly. So those are the other things you try to do in these settings. You don't try to make big changes because you're not sure of all the perturbations that those will cause.
Thank you. Toby, I saw your hand, and whoever wants next, give me a signal. Okay, Toby.
Okay, Doug, this is great. As to, visitation, patterns of visitation in the ferries. As I recall, I guess you were part of this Visitor Bureau study, Doug, that indicated, it showed that the typical visitor to San Juan County gets on the ferry if they're going to Friday Harbor as a walk-on, walks off, walks around Friday Harbor, walks back on and goes home. And the typical visit is about a day plus. And the typical visitor to Orcas stays like 3 days because you can't do that walk on, walk off so easily. So you need a place to stay. So I think that dynamic, if I'm remembering that correctly, the 2017 study that established that pattern, that explains, some of the differential between Orcas and the other islands when it comes to the vacation rental proliferation and density and overall impact. Now, the other thing is, though, Michael, you wanted to know more about this sort of notion of education. And what I'm getting at there is that, during the lockdown, during the initial stages of the lockdown, it seemed, anecdotally, we don't have data on this, but it certainly seemed like the vacation rentals around the islands were full, and they weren't supposed to be. And we've sent in complaints, to the sheriff's office and whatnot. And what happened was the sheriff emailed Airbnb and said, "What's the deal? There's somebody at one of these places." And Airbnb sent back, like a pre-canned response that said, "Oh, well, we're not doing any business now. We're shut down because of the lockdown." And the sheriff then closed the case and said, "Oh, well, I guess it wasn't a problem." So, that is what we mean about setting expectations and about finding a formula for enforcement that will be meaningful. Because if the vacation rental owners are taking, as an example here, the lockdown thing appropriately, they would post something on their listing on Airbnb that says, "You can't come here, it's in lockdown, this is not allowed." We know this was happening because people would post their comments in the comment section on Airbnb about how they like, their stay. And there was a number of comments that were saying, "Boy, it sure was great to get away from Governor Inslee's oppressive lockdown and get out on Orcas Island where we could be free." I mean, that's what we saw. And that's what we'd like to cure, is that if the owners take a role in setting an expectation, as we all agree, we should, in terms of recognition of the qualities of the islands that we all cherish. I think this could go a long way. This isn't something that this county council can really legislate. This is sort of this is thinking outside the box. Really, that's what I'm trying to do here. Is just come up with something helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Toby. Jan, I saw your hand up.
Thanks. I've got a little chat going with people I know while this is happening, and oh boy, what we're talking about right now just lit it up. So what you're talking about when you say the lockdown, you're referring to the San Juan County transient lodging ban, right?
No.
So what
No,
happened?
I'm referring to the governor's lockdown of everything in April of 2020, when the COVID thing hit, everything was locked down.
Yeah, and not only was everything locked down, but the county actually did a resolution, I think it was called, or a working order, that's what it was called, to literally ban transient lodgings on the islands, which was something that not every place in the country did. It was, again, quite strict. And you may have known a few people that continued to rent. However, most of us did not. And I can tell you from my personal experience, what I did was I provided housing for longer than 30 days to people that needed somewhere to be. There were people that got stuck where they were. And so I actually housed 2 different women for longer than 30-day stays during that entire time. I also have heard from other owners that just shut their rentals down completely. So it's not the case that everybody kept renting. They didn't.
We've lost Jamie here, but my next question was going to be and is what keeps coming up is around compliance. Jamie's back. What keeps coming up seems to be around compliance a lot, and that people don't have confidence in compliance, and that there were rules written in 2018, and there seems to be some agreement that they covered a lot of the ground that we're talking about tonight, but that we haven't found the structure or a way of giving confidence to everybody that the rules are going to be followed, and that when they're not, that there's going to be some intervention. Jamie, can I ask you about that? Has the county had a position or not had a position, or what's the status of that kind of thing around holding people accountable?
Yes, when we did those regulations, we do have a position. I would have to check to make sure, but if that position was somewhat repositioned during the pandemic, that's what we did with a lot of people. We had our auditors department working on covering grants for COVID response, but I don't buy the, I mean, we can always do better on enforcement is basically what we're looking at. We've come a lot further than we ever were on compliance. Like I said, we had a huge amount of people when forced to the wall gave up their permits in 2019 that had been carrying these permits because they didn't cost them anything. And so when push came to shove, they gave them up. We did over $100,000 in fines. That's a ton of money. I you know, some of the courts don't bring in that much in fines. So, you know, we did it, we have enforced and we are enforcing, but, you know, we can't rely on anecdotal information or problems people have when there's numbers for people to call of local people that are supposed to be looking over those vacation rentals. Or if we, you know, there's been very few cases, I know of one on San Juan, that it's a multiple offender, and they are permitted and they're a multiple offender, and we're in the process, the streamlined process of removing their permit. So no, is it perfect? No. Can we always use more code compliance? Yes. Can we always use more code compliance on building permits? Yes. But you know, having someone have a bad weekend because they had some bad neighbors, whether it's a VRBO or not, you know, there are people to call, and the sheriff is there to call. And you know, any suggestions on how we can do a better job at code enforcement on this are always appreciated. We're always looking for better ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask a question real quick, Michael, if I might. And I'm going to pose this to both Toby and to Jan. In your experiences, it sounds to me, Jan, as though the people who have vacation rentals, who are on the island, who live here, who know the culture, who are a part of the community, may respond more, for lack of a better word, responsibly or more quickly to any hassles. And we'll also want to make sure that the people who choose to rent are cognizant of what makes these places so wonderful. Is that true with people who don't live here? If, for instance, that vacation rental is managed by a real estate company or a management company, is there the same buy-in? Is there the same, if you will, care taken with the people who rent the place? And is the response the same? That's one part question for the two of you. And the third is for Jamie, and that is there, do you find that there is a greater increase in outside parties, perhaps people off the island or companies outside of the area who are managing these vacation rentals, who don't really know what the culture is here? I mean, I don't want to say they don't know, but they don't have the same intimacy with the place that the people who live here and have vacation rentals do. So I'd like to start with Jan and Toby, if I might.
Go ahead, Jan.
Thank you. So I would like to say that there really only are 3 property management companies that have extensive listings on the islands. 2 of them are local, and yes, I would say both of them are very much aware of all these things. As a matter of fact, one of them just texted to me and said that the biggest parties at their houses are by the owners and the family friends of the owners. They are able to regulate and control the vacation renters effectively. And another myth that happens around the islands is that there are people on the mainland that are corporate that own these vacation rentals. And actually, that's not true. Jamie mentioned it. I'll second that. Most of the vacation rentals are owned by people who live here, and most of them, they only own one. So I think that plus the rating system that the companies like VRBO and Airbnb give us really help us out, because we rate the guests about how they act when they're with us. And if they try to rent at another place and they were bad guests, they probably can't rent. So it's actually a wonderful, like, second way to help people behave.
Let's have Toby. Toby,
Yeah.
have you got a comment on this one?
Yeah, I mean, the ownership question is not one we have tried to pay a whole lot of attention to, because you run into constitutionality if you're trying to make a distinction, a regulatory distinction between somebody who's on island and who's off island. So that's kind of a false issue. But we are touching on a greater issue, which is that again, data. I will represent that there is a huge difference between customer behavior in a vacation rental where the owner lives in the building, where it's what we call a homestay or a one roof vacation rental, as opposed to an owner who is elsewhere, whether on the island or not, because that presence of that sort of landlord or landlady means a lot to the guests, and there's a personal touch, and it's a better experience for everybody. And as a regulatory matter, we've always felt, the Vacation Rental Working Group has always felt that there could be a distinction made between homestay, the one roof kind of a concept, versus the more remote kind of thing. So that's one aspect of that. But the other thing, and Jan and I, I would love to sort of sit down for lunch with Jan, because I think we have a lot of great stuff to talk about. But the bottom line is that, there may be regulations on the books, and there may be people that do it well and do it good, but we keep hearing the complaints. People don't want to call the sheriff. They don't want to call the sheriff and say they're annoyed by something. It sounds silly. It's like Black Lives Matter, where somebody's fallen asleep in the library and you have to call an armed police. No, that's not where the rubber meets the road here. It's how people feel and how we're addressing those feelings. How are we addressing, not refuting or denying the feelings, but addressing the feelings? And if we can get to that stage, I think we can come to some good understanding.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. Toby just did what I was going to ask all of you to do, and that is that he closed by having an appreciation, stating some appreciation for what he'd been through tonight, but then offering something at the end. And I'm going to invite each one of you to do that too, as you make a final comment. Doug, your hand was up. Was your hand up, Doug?
Yes, I just want to make a quick point about, I agree with the notion that not all VRBOs are the same, and the idea that you would treat homestays differently from whole houses, that you might treat differently from small lot ones versus big lot ones that are farther away. Those are all really important distinctions that I think ought to be part of the conversation when you try to craft solutions. So it seems like saying all VRs are the same is making a mistake in terms of they have differential impacts, and focus on the impacts, and then you'll probably get somewhere. So
okay. And
if-
then,
if we segue into the final there, I can close with that. Just reminding you again, what I opened with. The data from our studies in 2017 to 2019 showed remarkable consensus among the people that visit, who I think often do know exactly what you guys offer. That's why they're coming. They've paid attention. They're very savvy tourists these days because of all the internet sources. They know what they're getting. The people that live here know what they're getting. The people that have second homes know what they're getting. Most people here, most of the businesses, we rarely find this in national parks. We usually have a very strong business community in the gateway communities outside of parks that are just trying to make money. They really don't care about the place a lot. And then there's residents that do care about it, and there's environmentalists that care and that sort of thing. But your place has everybody caring. And I know that you feel like some of your visitors and VR guests are not necessarily like yourselves, but we didn't find that in the data. And we did find some distinctions between islands. That's true, although not nearly as big as the ones that I think you remember, Toby. They're not quite as big as you thought. But San Juan is an island you can go to without a car. Orcas is not. You probably do need a car. So that's part of what's the story with that island. But you could also set up a transit system in all of these islands, and a bunch of people wouldn't bring their cars, and then they wouldn't be as much of a problem. So anyway, but
remember
just
that.
remember
thank you.
you got good values, and most people agree with them.
Thank you, Doug. Jan, how would you like to close tonight?
Tough one.
You get a minute or two. Go ahead and
Okay.
close.
Well, just to wrap up the homestay discussion, I personally completely agree. I think that homestays should be treated differently from residents where there's no owner present. And I think if we do put a cap system in place, I think that homestays should not be included in that. And that brings up my big point that we haven't mentioned, working class folks. We still have people who actually have to work and who actually still live here. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And I think we should try to keep that. And actually being able to own a vacation rental is a way to do that for a lot of us. And finally, I'd like to mention Nantucket and Lake Oswego, actually. Both of those places in the last week voted on groundbreaking legislation saying that they did not want to restrict vacation rentals.
Okay.
That is a big thing. And I just want to see how we can all work together. And I think we can.
And how about an appreciation or an offering for tonight?
Oh, you guys are all awesome. Really, those of you that put this together, I thank you, because conversation is going on underground, and it's great to have it kind of out there. And thanks for everybody for joining us too. I'm looking forward to lots more conversations.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And Jamie, how would you like to close tonight?
Well, I'd just like to take some of the comments that were just made in their closings, and mainly is that, you know, I can be passionate about something, but when it comes to looking at regulations or other things like that, I can be passionate about the issue, but I can't let that passion go into our regulations. And I also think that as opposed to, this isn't an offering, but it is an offering. When Toby says people don't want to call the people, don't want to complain, don't want to do this, you know, what I've found during this past year in all of our communities is people do want to commit. People do want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of the solution, and they made great sacrifices to be a part of the solution to have, this is not about vacation rentals, but they made great sacrifices and a lot of volunteerism to make sure that we have like the lowest, best rated COVID response county in the nation. And I think that spirit, as Doug was saying, carries over to a lot of these things. So I don't think we can just foist off problems with vacation rentals to somebody else. I think we all have to be involved in it, and we all have to be a part of trying to bring people into compliance.
Thank you so much. And I'll let my partner, Diane's going to take us home. When you unmute.
I am, yes. Toby, were you going to say something or did you want me to?
Yeah, I just want to say one quick thing about Nantucket. I've been there years ago, but I have been to Nantucket. And I placed some calls today to find out what's going on there. And there's some differences with Nantucket. The average home price in Nantucket is $2.3 million. 50% of Nantucket is owned by their land bank under protected status. 4% of San Juan County is owned by land bank here. So there's, so it's a very different land, and the code and building codes and so forth, land use restrictions on Nantucket are absolutely over the moon. You have to pass an incredible amount of standards and so forth to build something. And there are some big VRs on the island. Some of them go for $22,400 a night. So it's a totally different deal.
Community.
And Nantucket is not facing proliferation. Never has. So
Let's stop
this is-
there for
Yeah,
tonight.
that's a good place to stop. And that,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, some of that information is already up on the network website. So people can refer to that study as well. And with that, I'm just going to quickly thank all of you for participating and giving up your time and giving us your opinions and your sharing your passion with this issue with all of us and with the webinar community and with those who live streamed it. For people who are interested in continuing this conversation in the webinar group and online, please register for the second forum, which is looking for common ground and trying to put together an action plan, which would be taken up on the third forum. I want to extend an appreciation to the audience for sitting through a Zoom webinar. It's not the same as being in the same room, but hopefully it gave you some information and things to think about going forward, particularly before the next one. There is a survey that you will get or that will be available to you. We encourage you to fill that out. It helps us. And also, again, to compliment and appreciate the San Juan Island Community Network for its sponsoring of the series and of tonight, and for the desire to look for common ground and actions that benefit everybody going forward. Again, I'm Diane Craig with the Sounder and my co-host Michael Soltman. Thank you all very, very much, and look forward to seeing you, or at least feeling your presence on Zoom in the next forum. Anyone else? Michael, anything else? Doug?
That's it. Good night.
Hey, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.